And in the beginning, said the Sumerian myths, was Eridu. Legend said this was the mound of creation, the first land which arose from the primal sea at the beginning of time. Here was a sacred shrine which preceded the first cities. At the root of civilization is the temple.
Eridu is lonely, windswept and abandoned today. But it was one of the most famous places in the history of Mesopotamia. Not only did the Sumerians believe that this was the site of the mound of creation, they thought that here kingship, that is political society, first came down to earth, and that here the arts of civilization were initially developed. It originally stood on a great sea of fresh water stretching out to the south, the Apsu. And the great temple here, the most famous shrine in Sumer, was named after it, Apsu, named after that primeval ocean of sweet water out of which all human life and all natural life came, so they believed. And in fact, when the archaeologists dug deep into the temple hill, they discovered, around the time of 5000 BC, a little sand mound surrounded by a reed fence with a tiny chapel on it, marking the site of that mound of creation. Hard as it may seem in this blasted landscape, but we're in the area of the original Garden of Eden.
For what the Bible calls paradise, Eden, was simply the Sumerian word Eden, the wild grassland of the south, the natural landscape before the arrival of the city. And picking over the debris of paradise, it's hard not to see the psychological truth of the Bible story, that the very beginning of our ascent to civilization was also the fall, when we tasted the fateful fruit of the tree of knowledge, the means by which we would become masters of the earth, and yet eventually gain the power to destroy it and ourselves. Truly a devil's bargain. Sumerian myths also tell how the arts of civilization which originated here in Eridu would bring both joy and sorrow. This, they believed, was what the gods passed on from here to future ages through the first true city on earth, Uruk. To get to Uruk today, you cross southern Iraq, skirting and Nasiriyah, names familiar now after the war of 1991. Then you enter a lunar landscape, a wasteland swept by gales of sand. Immense mounds loom out of the haze in a furnace heat. It's 135 degrees out here in the summer. Finally, you come to a city gate, still visible after nearly 5,000 years. Its approach silted with a deep tide of pottery and bones. And what feelings of anticipation any city dweller of our planet in the late 20th century would experience, arriving at the place which more than any other has shaped our modern world, both in its triumphs and in its disasters. The first Westerner to stand here in modern times, the Englishman William Loftus in 1849, was simply astounded. "Of all the desolate sights I ever beheld," he said, "that of Uruk incomparably surpasses all." Still 50 feet high, the line of eroded walls curves round to the horizon. In the center of the city are the ruins of a great stepped tower, a ziggurat, on which had stood the temple of the city's goddess, Inanna, whom we know as Ishtar. The first city began as a religious center. Standing on top of the goddess's ziggurat here in Uruk, you can get a real idea of the vast extent of this site, with a circuit of walls of more than 6 miles. Archaeology can show that these walls were built at the end of a period of extraordinary expansion when Uruk increased 4 times in size in just a few generations. Presumably then, thousands or even tens of thousands of people were moving in from the countryside to this new city life. And there are parallels for this kind of change from rural to urban life in Europe, for example, in England during the Industrial Revolution. Scholars now believe that the population of the Euphrates plain may have increased tenfold in these crucial 200 years. And to parallel that, you'd have to look at Mexico City today, doubling its size in 20 or 30 years. The effect of such growth was shattering. As far as the eye can see, this salt-encrusted plain was once big wheat country, with grain yields as high as the Midwest and Canada. But the need for more land, more intensive cultivation to feed an ever-growing population, eventually devastated the landscape. We know now that civilization inevitably destroys the environment, but they discovered it here for the first time. The question was the same for them as it is for us today: how to balance the fertility of the earth against the voracious demands of the city. The watchman at Uruk, Muha Abu Gumar, lives out here with his family. He belongs to one of the Montefic tribes who inhabit this part of the desert. His forefathers fought the Turks, the British, indeed anyone who tried to impose their rule on the south from the outside.
Now what is this then?
هذا من معبد أريقال سلوك.
White temple. Yeah. And this is Sumerian? From Sumer, yeah.
He knows the site like the back of his hand, down to the deep levels. These massive foundations of old Sumer. A stone-built storeroom from 3000 BC for temple food and beer. Alcohol is a Mesopotamian word.
God, this is amazing, isn't it? Really? So, after Parthi and Sassanid.
With the ups and downs of any living organism, the city lasted through to about 300 AD. But by the Arab conquest it was dead, after a life of over 5,000 years. It's a salutary experience walking these weathered gullies, littered with testimony to the long ascent of man, if such it is. Here were enormous temples and palaces as big as cathedrals, their facades decorated with blue glazed tiles, just as you'll see today on the mosques of Iraq.
This is from the Irigal Palace. So this is from the front of the wall of the palace. Oh my God. And from the Seleucid time. So this is when the palace was rebuilt after the time of Alexander the Great.
2000.
More than 2,000 years old, isn't that astonishing? Thank you very much.
هذا عصر العبيد تاريخه 6000 سنة قبل الميلاد.
So this is Obeid. Obeid. So 6,000 years.
6,000.
And this. But what is this here? What is this, Mr. Moha?
عملة بارتية.
It's money. It's a coin
money, flus.
of the Parthians.
بارتي.
So this is from Uruk in the time of the Roman Empire. Yeah. And this, I think I recognize.
And from the deep past, hints of the enigmatic beginnings we saw at Eridu. Sumerian pottery, wheel-turned pottery, for the wheel is found here for the first time in history, along with so many other great inventions we still live our lives by today. Here was the first astronomy, the first literature, the first school, the first map of the world. Here they first thought of dividing time and space in multiples of 60, so that even now, whenever we look at a watch, we're still in their debt. Inside Muhar's guest hut, within the old walls, we're the only inhabitants of Ishtar's city tonight.
It's wonderful to be here. And all these are your children, your little children. Hello.
Even so, Muha still observes the gracious formalities of desert hospitality.
Thank you so much for showing me around Warka. It is a wonderful sight.
Iraqis have always been great storytellers.